I am super excited and super nervous. So just we're doing this series called Cup of Woe, and so I have my cup of Joe. And okay, I know we're small, but we're in this together. We're in this together, and this is going to be a whole lot of fun. So we're going to look at this, and so the next 5 weeks we're going to look at these seven. There's actually seven, so today we're going to look at two of them, and I just Jesus is he's awesome, and sometimes more challenging than I want him to be. Maybe not for you, but for me, sometimes just a little more challenging than I want him to be. So that's what we're going to look at tonight. So if you have your Bibles, Matthew 23. If you don't have Bibles, there's a few Bibles, and page numbers will be on the screen. And just a couple verses. And if you get there, if you'll stand as we read God's Word together. We'll start reading at verse 13. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You shut the door of the kingdom of heaven in people's faces. You yourselves do not enter, nor will you let those enter who are trying to. And then verse 15, woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You travel over land and sea to win a single convert, and then you make that convert twice as much a child of hell as you are. This is the word of God for the people of God. And you said, thanks be to God. You may be seated this let's pray one more time. I know we just prayed a lot, but I just think we need to just open our hearts. God, we just pray that you speak. God, I pray that you speak. These aren't my words; they're yours. And Lord, if we're going to get this, it's only going to be because you speak and move and talk, and you search our lives and our hearts like never before. And so, Lord, we're giving you permission to do that. Lord, I'm giving you permission in my own life. Lord, I want you to do something in my life because I just want to be like you, man. I just want to be like you. It's not always easy to live out, but Lord, I want to do it. And so, Lord, this morning, speak to my heart. We need you, and nobody needs you now more than me. And so, God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be pleasing and acceptable to you, my rock and my redeemer. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Well, sometimes we say this. Well, nobody's perfect. Nobody's perfect. And sometimes we say this when we mess up. Well, nobody's perfect. But there are other times we say this when we're confronted with something that is very hard and difficult. Something we might seem as impossible. And so we say, well, nobody's perfect. And somehow it lets us off the hook to not have to do whatever it is we're being asked to do. And it's true, nobody's perfect. But I wonder what might happen if we allow God to push us towards the difficult thing, rather than just looking at it and saying, well, nobody's perfect, and we can just walk away from whatever it is God might be trying to tell us to do. I mean, God might want to change us. And the thing that we see as impossibility, and we just say nobody's perfect, and we just go live in life the way that we want to, he could actually make us more like him. It's possible. It's possible. Or maybe we look at it like this. Stephen Manley said this. He said, what about symptoms in your life? I mean, when you get a fever, a cough, a runny nose, a sore throat, or you start to hive up or something, it lets you know that something else is going on the inside, right? It lets you know that something is wrong, and so you need to pay attention to this. And so you go to the doctor, you get a Z-Pack, and you get better, right? And that's just basically what it is. You get a Z-Pack that cures everything, just about, and you get better. Do you find it strange that we react differently to symptoms in our spiritual life? Why are we quick to tolerate something in our spiritual life? Well, nobody's perfect, so I guess this is just the way I'm just going to live with this. Why don't we see the problem and maybe take it to the one who might be able to fix it? Why do we ignore it? And why are we quick to say, I guess that's just the way it's going to be? I wonder if we could open ourselves and be honest. I mean, gut level honest with ourselves. Let's see what God might be wanting to do. A little bit of recap. And so it's been a while since we've been in Matthew together. So this is the last week of Jesus' life. And so we talked about how in the last week, if you know the end is near, you don't waste words and you don't waste actions. You are very intentional about every single moment and every single word because you know the end. And so Jesus knows it's the last week. He knows what's coming. Friday and Saturday. I mean, he knows. And so this is like Tuesday. He knows he only has a few days. And so he's not like beating around the bush. He's not pulling any punches. He's not wasting any words because he knows the end is near. And it's his last chance to get the message across of who he is and how he wants us to live. And then we also need to, let's turn over to verse 37 of chapter 23. We also need to understand the motive and the disposition and the language and the way Jesus says this. So verse 37 of chapter 23 says this, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who kill the prophets and stone those who send to you, how often I have longed to gather your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and you are not willing. So this isn't Jesus standing up on a table in the temple and reaming the Pharisees. I think this is Jesus having this heart of compassion and wanting his people just to follow God with everything that they are. I don't think Jesus is pointing fingers. I think Jesus' heart is broken. I don't think Jesus is saying, get it together. I think he's saying, man, my whole dream and desire was just to gather you all under my wings. So we can't hear this as mean and hateful. I think we have to hear this from a heart of compassion and love and grace. If we read the first verse of chapter 23, it says that Jesus is talking to the disciples in the crowd. It doesn't even say he's talking to the Pharisees. And it's almost that intent, that understanding. The Pharisees potentially were in earshot. But it's almost like the piano teacher who's talking to the student who practices all the time and says, don't be like that other student who never practices, because they're going to be a terrible piano player. No, they don't say that. But they're never going to be as good as they could be. So he's trying to show the disciples, don't be like this. Now, the Pharisees may have overheard him. I don't know that Jesus was like, hey, guys, get close. But as he was talking, he was speaking to the disciples. So guess what that means? And guess who he was speaking about? The religious leaders, not the sinners, not the people out there. He was talking to the people who were running the church. So that's where we are. And that just gets you excited about the next 5 weeks. So, man, that just gets me fired up. I'm just so excited. Okay, so let's look at verse 12 of Matthew 23. This is where it all begins. From this heart of compassion, this is what Jesus is really getting at. Let's actually look at verse 11. The greatest among you will be your servant. For those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. And so Jesus says, this is the whole kit and caboodle. You want to know what it looks like to live for this kingdom? You want to be great? Go serve everybody. That's what greatness looks like. This guy named Jürgen Moltmann, who's a German theologian, said it like this, and I talked about the cross. He said, for me, the crucified Christ became more and more the foundation and criticism of Christian theology. And for me, that meant whatever can stand before the face of the crucified Christ is true Christian theology. What cannot stand there must disappear. And so the whole thought that this German theologian is saying is what we have to understand is if it's going to be Christian, if it's going to be understanding of what it means to be a part of the kingdom, this is where we begin, end, and then is in between, is right here. And if it can't stand up to that, if it doesn't match up to what the cruciform, this servant, I've come to give my life for everybody. I didn't consider equality. I humbled myself and became the servant of all. The Son of Man didn't come to be served, but he came to serve. And so if that's who Jesus was, that's where we have to start in the middle, between, every morning, every night, every second, every day. If it doesn't match that, then it's not Christian. Not Christian. That's what I think. And so Jesus in verse 11 says, if you want to be great, you got to be the servant of all, because whoever exalts themselves is going to be humbled, and whoever humbles themselves will be exalted. So that's the framework. The beginning, before he's talking to the disciples, he's talking to the church people about the church leaders, saying, watch out. And he's speaking from this heart of compassion, this heart of love, this heart of grace. Like, I just want to gather you all. So let's look at it. Verse 13, woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites, you shut the door of the kingdom of heaven in people's faces. You yourselves do not enter, nor will you let those enter who are trying. Jesus calls the Pharisees hypocrites 6 times in this passage. 6 times. Now, somebody needs to get that. Maybe that's all right. So we have to get in a mindset of what he means by hypocrite. Now, we've talked about hypocrite and how a lot of time what that meant is somebody who puts on a mask and who's pretending to be something that they really aren't. This has a little bit different feel. It's not you're an actor, that you're doing something that's totally different, but it has this different feel. Let's go to Galatians chapter 2. Galatians chapter 2. To get a feel for what Jesus is trying to say here about what it means to be a hypocrite in this setting. This is so awesome. I love this. You gotta love the Apostle Paul. Galatians chapter 2, verse 11. When Cephas came to Antioch, I opposed him to his face. Oh my goodness. Isn't that good? I opposed him to his face because he stood condemned. For before certain people came from James, listen to this, he used to eat with the Gentiles. But when they arrived, he began to draw back and separate himself from the Gentiles because he was afraid of those who belonged to the circumcision group. Woo. Is that not just like, how dare he? So to set it up, so I hang out with this group of people, and maybe they're not associated with this church. And then when certain people from this church come, I don't want them to know that I'm hanging out with this group, so I back away. Because they're circumcised, and those other people aren't. Okay. The other Jews, verse 13, joined him in his hypocrisy, so that by their hypocrisy even Barnabas was led astray. And so this whole thought of hypocrisy has nothing to do with you are acting and you're being something that you're not. It's inconsistent living. You're hanging out with the Gentiles because you believe that the message is for them too, except for when the Jews come around. And then you're like, I don't want anything to do with those people. It's inconsistent living. So it's not that the Pharisees are saying one thing and doing another, although sometimes they were, but this hypocrisy is they are inconsistently living and doing the things that they're asking you to actually do. Okay? So it's not an actor, it's inconsistency. It's not living and doing the things that you say you're going to do. Okay? Good stuff, good stuff. So the kingdom of heaven was attractive to people. It was attractive. People were digging it when Jesus was talking about it. And this guy named Harawas, next slide says, the kingdom of heaven is attractive and inviting. But the scribes and, oh, never mind. I'm just going to read it. Just listen. But the scribes and Pharisees prevent those so attracted from entering the kingdom. Listen to this. Because they do not live as if they have entered the kingdom themselves. People are digging Jesus. People are like, Jesus is awesome. But the Pharisees are pushing people away from Jesus. Here's the thing. Your life is a key. It's a path, you might say. It's a pointer. And your life is pointing towards something or someone. It is. Is your life pointing towards, let's go be like Jesus, or is it pointing towards something else? And so how did they shut up the kingdom of heaven? How did they do this? So some people, Jesus would cast a demon out of somebody, right? And they're like, this must be the Son of David. This has got to be the one. And what did the Pharisees say? It's by the prince of demons that he casts out demons. The people are getting it. This is Jesus. This is the Messiah. And the Pharisees are like, no, this is Beelzebul. He's casting out demons because he is a demon, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense in my mind. And so they're getting it. This is the Son of David. This is the one who is to come. And they're pushing people away from the one who is to come. I mean, the primary job of a religious teacher is to be that path, to set out torches or luminaries or whatever you want to say to Jesus to help people find their way to God. And these religious leaders, again and again and again and again, are knocking over the torches and blowing out the luminaries or doing whatever they can do to not get people to be like Jesus, because Jesus doesn't fit their idea about what Messiah was supposed to be. They have all this in the Old Testament that points to Jesus. And they missed it. We're going to talk about why they missed it in just a few moments. They missed it. So, I talk about this guy named Stephen Manley. If you don't know who he is, he's this Nazarene evangelist, and he wrote a commentary on this. And so, a couple of quotes not on the screen. He says this: "In their pride, the scribes and the Pharisees shut themselves off." Listen to this: by surrounding themselves with their laws. They could not love those who were not like them. If we establish rules, this is still Stephen Manley, for ourselves, which cause us to be unable to love those who don't meet up to our level, we have missed the heart of Christ. Now, we do this in so many different ways. Do I go here? Well, you're a Christian. I'm going to shut my eyes so you don't think I'm looking at you. You're a Christian, so that must mean that you're going to vote for this person. And if you don't, then you don't meet my law and my standard of what I think a Christian should be. This is what it means. And if you don't fit into this bubble and this box and this understanding, then you can't be following Jesus. Because this is what it is. This is what it is. Okay. Stephen Manning tells a couple stories about when he was in a revival, and this pastor comes to him and he's just sobbing and crying, and he's like, "I want to reach this community so bad." And I don't think this is our bent, but I think it's just a good example of maybe what this could look like. He's just sobbing. He's like, "I want to reach this community so bad." And Steve Manning's like, "Well, why don't you go talk to the people that you want to reach? Why don't you?" He's like, "We did. Me and my son started playing basketball. We set up a hoop in the church parking lot, and we play. And all of these community people and kids started coming and playing. It was awesome. And so naturally, I invited them to Sunday school and church. I mean, that was just the next natural step. But when they showed up, they didn't dress like everybody else. So people met them at the door and told them they needed to go home. See, is it good to dress appropriately? Unbelievably so. But shouldn't people find Jesus first? Shouldn't that be the goal? We can work on everything else. Isn't the goal to get them to find Jesus? And if there's any rule or regulation that blocks people from doing that, we miss the heart of Christ. He told another story about how the church got new carpet, and for some reason they got beige, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And so it was a rainy day, and then the van with the city kids showed up. And they had just done some yard work in the church, and the grass hadn't grown yet, and they walked across, and it had been raining, and all the kids' shoes were muddy. And the first thought was, we need to go stop them from coming in here because they might get our carpet dirty. Well, first off, you shouldn't have beige carpet. Let's just throw that out there. Second, you know how nice we could keep this place if we could just keep everybody out of it? It'd be a nice building. Beautiful. We would have to do some updates, but other than that, it'd be beautiful. Wouldn't it be better if we just had concrete floors and let kids with dirty feet come in? Whenever the rules and regulations stop us from reaching the people who need to hear about Jesus, we've missed the heartbeat of what this building is even for. Well, why do we even gather together? And so the Pharisees had all of this. Is having a nice facility bad? No. We need to paint. We need to make this place look a little bit nicer, I think. We have stains outside. It just drives me crazy. Not that we can do about it. You know what I'm saying? Like I think our building should look nice. And so this isn't to say have a trashy building, but when the building gets in the way of what your mission is, that's where the problem is. When the rules of what your building should be and what that looks like stops people from being able to come in, then we need to figure something else out and just shut the door. Because we're not living into the desire that God has for us. If how we conduct ourselves keeps people out of finding Jesus Christ, we need to figure out a different way to conduct ourselves. Because we're saying one thing, but we're not living consistently with what that message actually is. Does that make sense? Hypocrisy. Yeah, we want to reach the community, just not in here. Yeah, we want to love them, but man, they got to dress a certain way. Yeah, but but they got to clean this up before they. Really? I think that's what Jesus. So they had all these laws, and we got to get rid of all the people, the prostitutes, because they aren't holy. And if we're not careful, the way we structure ourselves can shut other people out of finding the Jesus that we want. Now, what's awesome is a woe is kind of this judgment, this potentially negative thing. But what is so beautiful is it's got this opposite. And we kind of already talked about them, but we're going to just talk about them again in the opposite. So this is kind of what the kingdom isn't. And Jesus, at the very beginning of the Sermon on the Mount, talked about what the kingdom is through the Beatitudes. And it's amazing how each one of these has a correlation and goes just almost perfectly. The writer of Matthew and Jesus were just brilliant. So what's the first beatitude on the slide? Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. So what does it mean to be poor in spirit? The Pharisees thought they had it all together. They really didn't need God. They had their laws and rules about what it meant to follow Jesus. A poor in spirit is a baby who relies on his mom or dad for food. His dependency is his salvation. Oh, we need to get that. His dependency is his salvation, and he lives. That if it's not for the mom or dad, that I'm not going to live. We've got to have this. God, we're hungry for you, because if I don't have you, I'm in trouble. I can't make it tomorrow without you in my life. I can't make it through this hard time without you being there. Poor in spirit is a student who doesn't know it all, but is teachable. God, I don't know. Man, I'm willing to learn. What does it look like to be Jesus in this situation? I don't know, but I'm willing to figure it out. I'm willing to listen. If a man sees himself as that the world owes him something, or he has rights, and we've heard a lot about rights this past week, haven't we? Okay, we'll move on. That must be catered to. I have my rights, and dadgummit, this is what it's going to be. And be catered to, it doesn't matter what it means for anyone else, because I have my rights. It's the opposite of poor in spirit. This man must be in control, or woman, and is filled with self-centeredness. But poor in spirit are people who know that they are made to be dependent on the one who is greater than themselves. They are not in control, and they surrender control to the master. I think Paul said it like this: I'm crucified with Christ, therefore I no longer live. And now it's Christ that lives in me. And this life I now live, I live by faith in him who loved me and gave himself for me. Poor in spirit says, take my life. I give it. Any right I thought I had is yours. Here's what. That's that. That's God, I don't want to do this. If you can take this cup from me, I'm a human being. I got rights. But if you can take this from me, but not what I want. Isn't this fun? Oh my gosh, this is fun. All right, let's go to the next one. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, verse 15, you hypocrites. You travel over land and sea to win a single convert, and then you make that convert twice as much a child of hell as you are. How much time do I got? Oh, good, I got plenty of time. Oh my. Oh my. Okay. Twice as much a child of Gehenna, which was the phrase Jesus used, and was the city dump outside of Jerusalem, where destruction and weeping and gnashing of teeth. But I think the big one is there's no peace. There was no you're always trying to do the next biggest thing because you can't just be content with who God's created you to be. You got to have the next biggest and the next whatever, and you can't just say, you know what, God made me this way, and that's just who I'm going to be. Now, this happened. Missionaries, it was thought when Matthew was kind of writing this, and we're going to convert Gentiles to be Christians. There was just one thing and that they were talking about. And what the law commanded was that if you were a Jew or a follower, a person of God, you had to be circumcised, which, isn't a big deal for women. But, if you're an older man, that's probably not very appealing. I can't imagine they had many converts. Hey, come be a part of our party, but we got to do one thing before, you know what I'm saying? It's like, I'll go join, the Presbyterians, or you know what I'm saying? Like, I'll go join. I'll just be this. I'm not interested in that journey right now. Hey guys, want to follow Jesus? There's just one thing we got to take care of. And they said it, they're like, that's all right. So there's this thought of you're going and you're making these converts, and so Jesus writes this, and but I think it was Paul. And you know, Paul. Paul said, "Circumcision or uncircumcision means anything. What counts is a new creation." Let's be about that. Let's be about that. Sometimes the people who come after the people are worse than the original people. Like I'm making little Esther an Alabama fan. She says "Roll Tide" more than I do. It's a good example. Good example. Maybe here's another one. So put those pictures on the slide. Anybody know who these two guys are? Anybody? Calvin and Wesley. Yes. So put the next slide. John Wesley is on that side, and that's John Calvin. Now, when I was growing up, I grew up in the good old South, and when I was growing up, there was this huge gap between Wesleyans and Calvins. I mean, and so in my context, it was between Nazarenes and Baptists, like this huge divide. I mean, we just could not get along, and it was just had all these discussions and arguments, and just that led nowhere, but we still had them anyway. Um, and so there's this huge divide between John Wesley and John Calvin, and it's what I grew up in, and it's what I. Do you know what John Wesley said about him and Calvin? Put up the next slide. We're but a hair's breadth away from each other. So how in the world did we go from hair's breadth to we can't even sit in the same room together? Although we have some Baptist brothers and sisters with us this morning, we can't even be in the same. How did we get from hair's breadth the people that came after them took what they said and said, let's go to the furthest point that we can with this. And generation after generation, from John Wesley and John Calvin, the divide got bigger and bigger and bigger, and it was never that way in the beginning. The people who come after the people are sometimes more radical than the original people ever. That's what this is saying. You go make a convert, and the problem is you're teaching them this misunderstanding of who Jesus really is, and you're making them twice a child of hell as you are, further away from the center of what this is all supposed to be about. Wesley and Calvin, who went from hair's breadth, which I don't know exactly, but I think it's like that, to this. And if we're not careful, we can do the same thing. Thomas Long says this. He has already asserted that the scribes and Pharisees have a heavy and burdensome religion, and now he bemoans that they travel all over the place to make converts who are twice as hellish. Listen to this: twice as bound up in legalism as they are. Ooh. Now, we Nazarenes know a bit or two things about legalism. We don't like to talk about We love. Well, let me just tell the story. I think I've told the story before, but it bears repeating. So there's this lady in my church, had the holy hair, skirts only. Her name was Sister Jennings, and she was one of the shouters in our church. Man, she could get going, and she sat kind of over here where Caleb is sitting. So she believed from Scripture, nothing wrong, that women were supposed to wear skirts and dresses only. So much to the point, she told other people that if you want to follow Jesus, especially women, this is what you got to do. So much to the point that her daughter wanted to be in the high school band, but because the band wore pants for their uniform, she wasn't allowed to be in the marching band. I know Maryland is bad. And this leaves an impression, okay? Um, so we can take something that was maybe really good and turn it into something that is not really in here at all. We can take something that's really good, and I have a list in my mind, and I'm not going to go through them, but we've done it in Nazarenedom, where we turn to something that originally the first generation said, man, we really shouldn't be a part of this. And the second generation and third generation said, if you're a part of this, then you're going to hell. I'm just calling it. I mean, I'm just telling you, as a Nazarene, and I love my tribe. Listen, I love my tribe. I love it. But just because I love it doesn't mean we don't have some things in our past that we need to kind of get beyond. So we took things that were good and intentional, and we turned them into that. This is what it looks like to go to heaven. So we love to do that. We love to. We got to be careful. Because guess what? The next generation is going to take what we say, and it's either going to lead people down a worse path, or it might just lead people to the cross. So what's the opposite of this one? Let's go to the next one. The second beatitude: Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. I think it's on the screen. Yeah, blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. What do we mourn? How is this the opposite of making people twice the child of hell that the Pharisees were getting at? Thanks for asking. Let's look at Luke chapter 18. We're almost done, I promise. But I'm having a good time, so we may go a little longer today. Luke chapter 18. And then we'll wrap it up. Verse number 9. To some, this is great, who were confident of their own righteousness and looked down on everyone else. Jesus told this parable. 2 men were in the temple, up in the temple to pray. One a Pharisee and the other tax collector. The Pharisee stood by himself and prayed, God, I thank you that I am not like other people, robbers, evildoers, adulterers, or even this tax collector. I fast twice a week and give a tenth of all I get. But the tax collector stood at a distance. He would not even look up to heaven, but beat his breast and said, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. I tell you that this man, rather than the other, went home justified before God. For all those who exalt themselves, sounds familiar, will be humbled, and all those who humble themselves will be exalted. So what do we mourn? We mourn our tendency to want to be selfish, self-centered, egotistical. I'm better than this person. We mourn that. And when we mourn that and we have this attitude towards God that the best I can be is a sinner before him, and we beg for his mercy, you know what happens? It says those who mourn will be comforted. When we approach God on that time, that understanding, that position, when we approach God with that disposition in our own life, forgiveness happens and reconciliation happens, And things that were once this way are turned this way. But it has nothing to do with how great we are and how many laws we can have. It has nothing to do with how many converts we can get. It has everything to do with approaching the throne of grace and humbleness and respect and never getting to the point that we have it all figured out. But daily I come before God and I say, God, I am lost. I am in trouble without you. And maybe if we teach the next generation what it looks like to live like that, maybe if we teach the next generation that it's not about following all these rules, that's what's going to get you to heaven. It's having this heart that says, God, I'm undone without you. That they might strive more and more and more to be that. And they might train their kids to be more and more and more like that. And then when we're winning converts, it's not to a set of laws or a set of rules. Are they important? Yes, don't hear what I'm not saying. Are they important? But they're only important if I'm humbling myself before the one who gives me life to the fullest. Then I live into the story and the plan and the dream that he has for me. But only then. And I'm calling people not to live for a law. I'm calling people to live for Jesus. And if I do that, I believe with everything that I am, we say it all the time, love God with everything that you are and do whatever you want to. Because I believe that if you love God with your heart, soul, mind, and strength, your desire is going to be to please him. Everything that you are is going to be, I give all to you. I give all to you. So the reason it's the opposite is because what I'm converting people to is not Nazarenedom, although I love it. It's that. And if we do that, I believe the holy life is what follows after that. Everything. Do we need laws? Yes. Do we need rules? Sure. But when the laws and the rules become the point, we're converting people to a religion rather than the relationship. That's where the danger comes in. So when we start at the cross, we don't see ourselves as any better than anybody else. We're just like them. We've just chosen already to follow Jesus, and they haven't yet. So let's begin. Or let's end. Sorry. You're like, oh no. We're just beginning. That was the intro. And let's end where we began. Nobody's perfect. And you can use that as an excuse if you want to. Or you can push into God's mercy and God's grace and allow him to make you more like him. Maybe some repentance needs to happen. That's not a word we like to talk about in the Nazarene holiness movement is repentance, but maybe some repentance needs to happen this morning. Maybe it's for things that have been in your past. Maybe it's for things that seemed right at the time, and you did it because you thought that's what God wanted you to do, but potentially it caused more harm than it did good. One Sunday night, Sister Jennings stood up during church and she apologized. She said she was wrong. She said who called her daughter, who ironically wanted nothing to do with the church, and apologized to her as well. What's wrong with a little repentance every now and then? Can we hear collectively, in our own heart and life, the greatest among you will not be the one who has the best laws and the best rules, will not be the one who's winning the most converts to those laws and rules. The greatest among you will be the one who serves. And if we ever live outside of that, then Jesus might say this to us as well. And we realize and hear this morning that Jesus isn't talking to all the sinners. He's talking to me this morning. So what does God want to say in your life? So Paulding Nazarene, may you this week go live the life of the cross. May you be the best servant you know how to be, because in being the servant of all, you're being like Jesus. And may his cross be so imprinted on your life that people see him and are drawn to him and are attracted to him. And when they are, may we be